Thank you again. One of the common denominators in all of our efforts is to transform education and to focus on creating a vision. The vision is to improve quality. The vision is to ensure equity. The vision is to innovate. The vision is to expand opportunity all over the place. The vision is to help every child in every community, in every corner of the globe, rise to their full potential. Making real progress towards those goals takes vision as well as courageous leadership. Today, I'm honored to introduce a remarkable visionary and an awe-inspiring leader, Sal Khan. Sal took a very simple idea and a practical idea and turned education on its ear. He spoke at our national summit in 2016 and told the story of this very simple idea. He wanted some of his young cousins to do better in math, so he recorded a few lessons, each one building on information in the previous one, and posted them on YouTube. Well, that's an interesting idea. Sal's math lessons gained a bit of a following from family and friends, and then friends of friends and friends of other friends, and then about 50,000 strangers. He kind of knew he was onto something when that started, and in 2010, two people critical to his story thought so too. Andor, who was an engineer and a leading philanthropist here in California, got wind of what Sal's doing. She's here today and became a supporter. And there was some computer guy further north of that. You may have heard of his name. He's Bill Gates. Saw the YouTube videos, and he got excited. And both of them made really generous contributions. And Sal was off and running with Khan Academy. Ann now serves as the board chair and is with us, as I said, this afternoon. And I want to acknowledge the Ann and John Doerr and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and many other partners and supporters who have been instrumental in Khan Academy's success. Fast forward 10 years from the start of this incredible organization. In one short decade, those YouTube math lessons grew into a worldwide phenomenon. The largest and most far-reaching online learning platform in the world. Sal's mission of Khan Academy is to provide a free world-class education to anyone, anywhere. Like ExcelinEd, he believes that everyone can learn. His vision to give every student that chance is what motivates and drives him further. Khan Academy now has more than 85 million registered users in nearly 200 countries around the globe. We're going to ask Sal to recite from A through Z, all of those countries. And it's translated in more than 40 languages. Its students are as far away as Mongolia and South Africa and near as Gaslamp Quarter and Coronado Island here in downtown San Diego. Testimonials from students and teachers and parents and others praise Khan Academy for empowering them with access to courses, learning in a way that is personalized, and unimagined success and achievement comes from that. Like any true visionary, Sal isn't finished. In fact, I got a sense that he's just getting started, and he'll be telling you more about what's coming next. Ladies and gentlemen, for his transformative accomplishments on behalf of education and students across the country and now around the world, I'm pleased to invite Sal Khan to the stage and honor him with our Excellence in Education Award. Sal? You're a good man.
Thank you.
Come on over here.
That means, thank you.
Have fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Governor Bush, and everyone involved with ExcelinEd, and that incredibly generous introduction. I feel like I get disproportionate credit for what Khan Academy is, but Jeb mentioned some of the folks who've been involved in it, but it's really, there's 200 full-time employees at Khan Academy. There's 14,000 people around the world who've helped really spread what we're trying to do. I'll tell a little bit about where we're going, and then we'll open up to questions. But I always like to start this type of a conversation, just getting a sense of the crowd. How many of you have children who've used Khan Academy? Okay, a good number. How many of you work in schools or have worked with schools that use Khan Academy? How many of you have used it yourself? All right. No shame there. People are nervous giggling. And how many of you really don't have much of an idea of what it is? Okay, good. That's why we're here. There's a few folks. So as Governor Bush introduced, we're known for a collection of videos, but as I'll talk about, we're much more than that. We're about mastery learning, practice-based software, tools for teachers and district officials. But just to get everyone on the same page for what at least the videos look like, I'll show you this montage.
Of these interactions are just due to the gravity.
This is an age right after Isaac Newton.
I'm told the humidity makes it feel hot. Why is this?
Excellent question, LeBron.
And you can just see the pleasure he had.
The right to privacy as such is not spelled out in the Constitution. Of course, the word liberty is.
Things actually can interbreed, although for these two in particular, it seems like the mechanics would get kind of difficult.
I can keep playing around with these numbers and see what kind of colors I can come up with.
If this does not blow your mind, then you have no emotion.
Euler's identity is always a crowd favorite. I'm glad to see in this. As I mentioned, it's much more than videos. This is if you have children, if you're a student, or if you've used it yourself, you've probably seen things like this. What you see here is actually a screenshot of a teacher actually making assignments for students. You can see it's not just math and science. This is some of our content in world history. You saw a video by Justice Kennedy and our civics and government. We have work on American history. There's game mechanics that will hopefully keep kids motivated. Tools for teachers. This right over here, Governor Bush alluded to it. It's where we are now. We're approaching 90 million registered users, approaching 20 million of them come and do some type of a learning action almost every month, and 200,000 teachers, mostly in the US, but around the world, who are also using it in various forms in their classrooms. And before I talk more about where this is going, I'll give a little bit more texture on what Governor Bush alluded to on how all this started, because it really was a very kind of organic and serendipitous journey. As he mentioned, 14, 15 years ago, cousin Nadia, 12 years old, having trouble in math. I offered to tutor her. I actually found out at my wedding about this. The tutoring, she was in New Orleans, I was in Boston. I started tutoring her over the phone. It kind of worked. She gets caught up with her class. She was being placed into a remedial math class. When I saw her catch up, I became what I call a tiger cousin. And I called up her school. I'm sure y'all appreciate calls like this. And I said, I really think Nadia should retake that test. They said, who are you? I said, I'm her cousin. But and that same Nadia, who was in a remedial math class, ended up being in an advanced math class. So I was hooked. I started tutoring her younger brothers. And then over the next couple of years, I was working as an analyst at a small hedge fund that my firm moved out to Northern California, but more relevant to this story, word spread around my family that free tutoring was going on. And I soon found myself with 10, 15 cousins, family, friends all over the country that I was working with every day after the markets closed. And I just saw a pattern over and over again. They were a lot of times even A or B students, but the reason why they're having trouble in, say, algebra had nothing to do with the algebra. It was because they had a gap in fractions, or a gap in negative numbers, or a gap in exponents. And so I started covering that with them. I had a background in software, so I said, hey, let me see if I can write some practice software for them. This was, back in 2005, 2006, there wasn't a lot on the internet that was really good at that. And I saw it was working for them. So I kept making that software. That was actually the first Khan Academy, had nothing to do with videos. And I was showing this off at a dinner party. As you can imagine, I'm a fun guest. And while I was doing that, the host said, well, how are you actually scaling your lessons? And I said, it's hard. And he said, well, why don't you try recording some of them as YouTube videos for your family? And I immediately said, no, YouTube's for cats playing piano. It is not for serious math. But I got over the idea that it wasn't my idea, and I decided to give it a shot. And long story short, I asked my cousins to use it at their own time and pace, et cetera. After a month, they gave me the feedback that they liked me better on YouTube than in person. So I kept going. And it's clear they didn't say that they didn't appreciate me in their life, but what they were saying is, when you are insecure about something and you don't want to waste your cousin's time and you're actually embarrassed that you forgot something from 4 years ago, It's really comforting to have something where there's actually zero judgment, and that you can get at your own time and pace, and that when you get together with your cousin, your tutor, your teacher, your parent, you can go a little bit deeper. So I kept going, and soon it became clear that people who were not my family were watching, were using these resources. And I remember in those early days, I brought my wife over. I was like, look at this story. There was a mother who said that she was praying for me and my entire family every night because both of her sons had a learning disability, and this was the only way that they were keeping up with their class. And you gotta remember, my day job at the time, I was an analyst at a hedge fund. I was not used to people praying for me, at least in that way. And so you fast forward another couple of years, and as Governor Bush mentioned, by 2009, there was about 50,000 people who were using this. And we had saved up some money. We said, hey, this could be a real thing. Set it up as a not-for-profit, mission-free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And that first year is tough. I think any entrepreneurial journey, you kind of jump in super optimistic, but then you see that, hey, it might be a little bit more difficult. But as was introduced, people started to come out of the woodwork. And in 2010, we had our first really significant funding. And what we immediately started working on is this notion of how do we let students take agency over their learning. And to appreciate it, I'll give a little bit of a metaphor, and these are actually things that I whipped together not too long ago. In a traditional academic model, kids are grouped together, usually by age, and around middle school age and a perceived ability, and they're moved together at a set pace. And what'll typically happen, say we're in a middle school math class, the teacher will cover exponents, we'll go home, do some homework, there might be some in-class practice, we'll review homework, another lecture, lecture homework, some activities. Then we have a test after a week or two. And on that test, I might get an 80%, you get a 90%, you get a 95%. Even though we have identified those gaps, I didn't know 20% of the material on that test. Even the A student, what was that 5% she got wrong? Maybe it was a careless error, or maybe it was something really important. Even though we've identified those gaps, the whole class will then move on to the next concept. Probably a concept that will build on those gaps. It might be negative exponents now, or logarithms. And that process just keeps happening year after year. Those gaps keep accumulating, and then all of a sudden you get to algebra class and the equation doesn't make sense because there's a negative exponent in there, or there's decimals in there, and you forgot how to do that. And to appreciate how strange that is on some level, imagine if we did other things in our life that way. Say, home building. So you bring in the contractor, and you say, we have 2 weeks to build the foundation, do what you can. So they do what they can, maybe it rains, maybe some of the supplies don't show up. 2 weeks later, inspector comes and says, all right, concrete's still wet over there, that part's not quite up to code, I'll give it an 80%. And you say, great, that's a C, let's build the first floor. Same thing, you do what you can, you got 3 weeks to build the first floor, contractor comes and says, hey, that's a 70%. You say, okay, great, that's a C minus a D, let's build the second floor. And while you're building the second floor, the whole structure collapses. And if your reaction to that is the reaction we typically have in education, you might say, oh, well, maybe we needed a better contractor, or maybe we needed more inspection. Maybe that's part of it, but what's really flawed is the process. You're artificially constraining when and how long to work on something, and you're ensuring a variable outcome. A, B, C, D, F, it should be the other way around. You should have variable when and how long students can work on something, and what's fixed is that you get to a high level of mastery. And to appreciate what's happening in our system, because students are accumulating these gaps, this is, whether you want to call it my favorite or my least favorite stat, is you see this. 70% of kids who go to community college in America have to take remedial math. And remedial math is a euphemism for essentially 7th grade math. And I know a lot of y'all are very familiar with the problem. The community colleges, even after they've taken 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, they've taken classes called algebra and geometry and trigonometry. They go to college, and most of them are told that you aren't even ready to learn algebra. And so you have to learn those basics. And if you don't get that, that's the biggest predictor that you're not going to graduate, and that you're going to not graduate and have debt and probably be demoralized. And as I said, this is despite the fact that they've gone year after year after year through that process. And so our theory of change here is, what if we could give the tools to teachers? And every teacher I talk to especially math teachers or science teachers, but really all teachers, they know this is happening. They know they get the standardized test scores at the beginning of the year. They see a third of their students, half their students aren't quite at grade level, but they don't really know what to do with those students. And we said, well, what if that assessment could inform personalized practice on a platform like Khan Academy? And so what we've decided to do is, hey, let's go reach out to some of the assessment providers. And we reached out to the NEA folks, Northwest Education Association, the administrators of the MAP assessment. 20% of American students take that, and say, what if your assessment, which is really the gold standard on measuring growth, were to inform personalized practice on Khan Academy, and that teachers, and it wouldn't be, and the students would use it maybe 30, 45 minutes a week, and that every time you take the MAP growth assessment again, we're going to be able to see how that personalized practice drives that growth. And they were like, yes, this is exactly what we've been hearing from districts as well, especially if we can do the rostering properly, roll up the data, do support training, and let all of the educators from the superintendent on down really see what is going on in real time. And this is just another example of the types of dashboards that a teacher would see if, say, they do this one class period a week, where it doesn't take the teacher out of the equation, and in fact empowers them. It gives them agency. They can change the recommendations if they want, but more importantly, it can humanize the classroom. They can see, hey, that kid's having trouble with that from the dashboard. Let me do a focused intervention with them. Or those students are already moved ahead, why don't I make them my teaching assistants and have them work on that subject with their peers? And I was just in Las Vegas last week, and I actually saw that happening in a really high-need community. And those kids who were getting tutored by their peers were getting personalized instruction above and beyond the technology. They were getting it from a human. And then on top of that, the humans that were able to be the tutors, those kids' self-esteem, and they were learning things that you would never expect to learn inside the context of a math class. This right over here, our biggest pilot this year, we decided to, we were targeting 50,000 students this year. It ended up being 250,000. And Clark County, Las Vegas, is the 5th largest school district in America, is the biggest pilot that we're working with. And this is a quote from Dr. Jara. Clark County has set out a 5-year plan to increase proficiency in reading, math, and science, and to significantly narrow opportunity gaps. We cannot meet our ambitious goals without providing our teachers with the best research-based resources they need in order to succeed. One of his major theories of change is we have to give the teachers the tools to differentiate. We can't just tell them to differentiate, but we also have to have the data and the monitoring so that we can understand what's working and where it is. And ideally, it's integrated with the formative, the interim assessments that are being used. And there's sometimes a stereotype when you think about online learning that it's this kind of Vulcan Borg reality of just kids on a computer and they're not socializing and things like that. And when it's done well, I think it's the exact opposite. I just gave you this example of kids being able to tutor each other, et cetera. But what you're also going to see in this video is they can have shared goals across their classroom. And this video is actually kids in math classes using Khan Academy about to see whether they've achieved their shared goals.
Okay, you ready to check our progress? Yeah! All right, here we go.
Yes, So a lot of y'all are wondering, where is the data? What do we know so far? And this is an ongoing journey. We have a whole efficacy and research team that's continuing to try to understand better what's the best use of Khan Academy, where is the impact, how does it impact different types of students. But a lot of the data that we've gotten so far is definitely pointing in the right direction. You heard earlier from folks from the College Board that we've partnered with them. We're the official practice for the SAT now. And the PSAT acts as a diagnostic for personalized practice. That's actually where we got the idea for partnering with the NEA on the MAP assessment as well. And what we're able to see is if students are even able to put in 6 hours over 6 months, which isn't a lot of time, and it's not about test prep, it's about becoming more college ready as measured by a test like the SAT, even 6 hours over 6 months of personalized practice, being able to fill in those gaps, and actually not just in math, but in reading and writing as well, these kids are able to grow 50% more than expected over that 6 months from the PSAT to the SAT. We're seeing similar things in K through 12 classrooms, where if kids are even able to put in 45 minutes a week, we're seeing strong associations with them growing 20, 30% more than expected. And we're really excited. One of the really cool things about this partnership with the NAA MAP assessment is that we're going to be able to tie the growth measures and the efficacy to what's happening. And so districts are going to be able to see in close to real time, or at least a much shorter cycle, what's working and what's not. This is, the usage of Khan Academy, and you can see it's when you do something like a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere, what you really care about is it reaching the students who need it the most. And you can see that our usage is actually fairly proportionate to the country as a whole, and that's actually good, because for the students who could use other resources, it's actually very validating that they choose to use this resource, but for the kids who don't have the resources, they are also using the same one. And the one example I always like to give is, in a world like this, it's heartening to see this proportionate, but it's also important to see what would happen if you were to take it away. If you were to take it away, we did a survey at some universities, has Khan Academy had a meaningful impact on your education? And 60% of the kids at college said, yes, it's had a meaningful impact on our education. And it was 64% of kids who were first generation into college said it had a meaningful impact on their education. And they said things like, this is the tutor my family couldn't have otherwise afforded. This is the way that I was able to get access to rigorous material that wasn't available in my rural high school or available in my urban high school. And so it's super important to think about what would those kids have done if we didn't at least give them some type of an outlet. So everything I've talked about so far is the world that most of us live in, the US, the English-speaking world, and that is our priority. And in fact, this work that we're doing with districts, especially this partnership with the MAP and this partnership with the College Board, these are our core priorities. But as Governor Bush introduced, there's a ton of people in the broader world using it. And these are all cool pictures of other NGOs, other volunteers taking Khan Academy into the broader world. And they're all exciting, but the one in the top right was probably one of the more surprising for me. A young girl named Zaya sends me an email with a kind of a video testimonial. I immediately assumed that she's middle class or upper middle class because her English was quite good. She had access to the internet. But it turns out there was a group of engineers from Cisco Systems who were using their vacation time to go to Mongolia and set up computer labs with internet in orphanages. And Zaya was one of those orphans. And what's been even more exciting is that Zaya has now graduated from high school, and she's actually our top contributor to Khan Academy in the Mongolian language. So she's doing peer tutoring at a mega scale now. Another story, this is actually a fairly recent one. About 7, 8 years ago, Taliban take over a town in Afghanistan, forbid all the young girls from going to school. This young 12-year-old Sultana was one of those young girls. She was directly threatened with violence if she even attempted to go to school, so she doesn't. She's at home doing 10, 12 hours of chores every day. Her brother-in-law sees that she's curious, she wants to learn, got her a very low-cost laptop, a very basic internet connection, and that was her lifeline. Between her chores, she first tried to learn English. She got a copy of a Time magazine that had an article on Khan Academy. She's like, this is what I need. And so she was able to tap into that and get from not even a middle school level, really an early elementary school level, start learning. At some point, she realized she's learning a lot more than her brothers at the Taliban-controlled school, and she kept going. She gets through algebra, trigonometry, calculus, statistics, physics, chemistry, and she decides that she wants to become a physicist and do research in the US. And so she learns about the SAT. She also learns that it's not administered in Afghanistan. It is administered in Pakistan. So she lies to her parents and smuggles herself across one of the most dangerous borders in the world to take the SAT. So if any of you have teenagers who are complaining about a Saturday morning, please tell them Sultana's story. She does surprisingly well for someone who's completely self-taught, not just academic subjects, but even English. And that's when I find out about her. Someone she met over the internet finds my email address. I start working, trying to introduce her to folks. But luckily, Nicholas Kristof found out about her as well and wrote this article in the New York Times, Meet Sultana, the Taliban's Worst Fear. And it was this article that actually allowed her to get political asylum. And as we speak, she's finishing up at ASU in physics. She spent the last summer. She spent the last summer at Caltech doing research in quantum computing, and she's doing a research with Nobel Prize-winning physicists at MIT as well. So you can imagine there's a lot of potential out there. So it's a priority for us. You know, the US, English, and Spanish are actually our core priorities, but we also, in the long run, want to be able to reach people around the world. These are splash screens from Khan Academy in various languages. And just to appreciate what at least the videos look like, it's not just the videos, it's the teacher tools, it's the software, it's everything. I'll show you this next video.
Me comí 2 cuartos de pizza.
L'hypoténuse commune, ok.
7, 13, 15.
और मैं इस हाथ से इस ब्लॉक को धकेलने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ इस डायरेक्शन में.
توجد قطعتين من معدن النحاس والزنك.
P R به توان 2 ضرب داره.
que a הנקודה שבה שוק הסיום של הזווית חותכת את מעגל היחידה.
Ili muweze kuelewa na kuweza.
Into yokuqala kufuneka siyazi kukuba kubani
16 bölü 16 1'e eşittir.
Muitas e muitas outras coisas importantes.
I'm Zaya from Mongolia. Your videos are so interesting and funny. Make more lessons.
I watch that when I get lazy. That's happens more often than I. These are just more pictures of Khan Academy being used around the world. And you know, when I see pictures like this, and obviously we have the data of how many millions are using it, but this is what makes it very personal. I tell all the stakeholders, and to be clear, it's much more than me, 200 full-time employees, you know, Ann Doer, Ginny, our president and COO is here, Catherine from our team is here. They're the ones that are making this possible. 14,000 volunteers around the world. Hundreds of thousands of people donating. This is primarily philanthropically supported. I know many people in this room have helped make this happen, and that's what fuels this, and we always need more of it if we want to deliver on it. But what I tell all of y'all, because I think we're all in this mission together, is that, you know, there's a lot of talk about technology. I know y'all heard yesterday about social media and what it might be doing to our youth, et cetera, et cetera. We hear about artificial intelligence and what it might do to jobs. But in my mind, anytime humanity has ever gone through an inflection point like this, the same things that are causing the tension could also be part of the solution. And what I'm excited about is partnering with all of y'all to think about how can we take these tools that we're being presented with to get to some of the ideals about making classrooms more human and empowering more human beings. And I think in partnership together, and it's really everyone on deck, Khan Academy is only a small part of it, we have a shot over the next 10 or 20 years of navigating all of this stuff that's going on with social media and the government and politics and artificial intelligence, and get everyone to participate at the top of the pyramid of the knowledge economy and really make a free world-class education a true human right. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Should I go?
Right there,
right.
Wow. Every time I hear him speak, I think he could have been a great stand-up comedian. And thank God he didn't decide to go that route.
Yes.
So, you know, you've come to our summit. I've heard you speak 3 or 4 times, and I've never gotten your background. Like, it starts as a hedge fund analyst. Can you go a little bit further back?
Yeah,
Talk a little bit about how you were brought up and.
I was born and raised in Metairie, Louisiana, right outside of New Orleans.
Yeah.
Oh, are there folks from Metairie here? That's exciting. Yeah, I mean, you know, anyone who familiar with.
Is that why you said y'all?
That is why I say y'all. It's not. That's how I was raised. That happens that way. But the. You know, my parents immigrated. So my father came in the late 60s to LSU, New Orleans. He was a doctor, a pediatrician, and so he did his residency. Then in the early 70s, he went back, and it was literally an arranged marriage with my mom. My mom wasn't even sure which brother she was marrying. And they came, and then my sister and then I were born, but they ended up separating, and you know, my father went through some issues and ended up, you know, dying early, and so my mom raised us as a single mother, and you know, I didn't realize it at the time, but you know, she was like, I thought she had the coolest job, but she was the person who used to open the vending machines at actually the hospital where I was born to kind of get the change out, and you know, most of our And then at some point she saved some money, and she was a cashier at a 7-Eleven for about 10, 12 years, and then she saved money to open up a store, and now she runs a school uniform store, a fashion arcade in Metairie, Louisiana.
Fantastic, fantastic. So your mom had a lot of influence in your life?
Yeah, and I got to say, she's a very strong person, and sometimes that can lead to things. But she's
You have the same thing that my mom. Whenever I start thinking, doing the wrong thing, or about ready to say something stupid, I have this looming presence of my mom behind. You got the same issue?
It's exactly. Whenever I'm like, my wife always gives me trouble because if I order at the restaurant, they give me the wrong dish. I tend to be like, oh, I'll just eat it, and then she's like, what would your mother do? And I was like, oh, she would return the food. and so it gives me confidence. I was like, I am Gulnar Khan's son, which you need some. I'm sure you've had that thought in your mind sometimes too.
I did. I grew up, I'm a little older than you, so when I grew up, there was no child abuse hotline numbers, which saved my mom from a lot of interviews with Department of Children and Families investigators. But
this is really turning into a therapy session.
Yeah.
We could keep going.
So we'll move on from childhood. So when you started, this was a direct-to-consumer kind of enterprise, right? People would go online. They would moms and dads would help their child. The child would do it directly. Internationally, that still is the case. But you focused a lot recently. How can you take this into the classroom, where ultimately, a majority, if not close to 100% of children are going to be learning in a classroom setting? And what are the challenges of doing that? And where have you seen success? And you're in front of policymakers in 48 states. What are the things that policymakers can do to kind of accelerate the incorporation of this customized learning, mastery-based, what do you call it? Mastery-based learning?
Mastery learning, personalized learning.
Yeah, we got to come up with a name that everybody uses.
Exactly.
Anyway, when you figure that out, send the memo out to the rest of us. Because to me, it's the wave of the future, but there's a lot of challenges as it relates to funding and accountability and assessment and things that we have to sort out. But what are the practical things that would allow you to have the same kind of scale you've had to direct to consumer, direct to student, how do you make that happen in the classroom?
Yeah, I view it as, and I tell the team at Khan Academy this all the time, we're kind of entering chapter 3 of our organization. Chapter 1 was me in a walk-in closet making stuff for family and trying to show that this is a legitimate project. Chapter 2 was when folks like Anne noticed that this is a legitimate project, and that was essentially the last 9-10 years where we scaled up to millions of students, a lot of grassroots adoption, teachers as well using us grassroots, and even from the early days we had aspirations of being used in school. And I think in the early days we're like, mastery learning, it makes sense. I'd be in front of rooms of teachers like, of course, this makes sense. But the reality is it's hard to do that type of wholesale change. What happens to the grades? How do you make sure you cover everything? There's a lot of big questions that have to be dealt with. What's kind of allowing us to get into this next chapter is when we looked at some of those efficacy studies, we're like, hey, there's something pretty powerful happening here, even when kids are able to use it 45 minutes a week. So maybe it can be an and. So 4 days a week, go through hopefully a very good curriculum that the school is using, but at least give some time and space so that kids can fill in gaps if they have them, learn at grade level. Some kids can move ahead, and even the kids that move ahead, that might give them a cushion so that later if they take more time for something else, they're not going to fall behind. Have that outlet, but empower teachers so that they can also see where their kids are and then use that to inform all of their instruction. They might realize that all their students already know a concept quite well, and so they can move ahead and focus on something more difficult and empower everyone with data. When we talk to districts about, hey, is this doable? They said, yeah, this actually feels like a nice step, and it feels like it'll have a lot of impact. Can you integrate with our assessment systems? Can you integrate with our rostering systems? Can you give us the support, the training? Can you give us a district dashboard or even a state dashboard that rolls up so we can really understand what's going on in near real time? And that's kind of chapter 3 for us. For a long time we were like, wow, that's a lot to do for a small organization. But I think we're now, having partners like the NWEA, having partners like the College Board, we think we're ready, and we're excited. Las Vegas, Louisville, Kentucky, Long Beach out here, Glendale, a couple of districts in the Central Valley, Seminole County. in Florida, we are starting this pilot, and it's going quite well. And so we're excited about continuing this. And if I were to say one thing if we can figure out some space in the system, and I would say both budgetary space and curricular space so that some of this can happen, and then we can kind of be off to the races together on how this can be used to not only accelerate students, but also inform everyone in this room where their students are.
Well, can you envision like the fourth phase of this, where instead of 45 minutes a week, it's basically how you learn math and how you learn other subjects, where it's not just in addition to, it's actually how we learn?
Yeah, the dream scenario is that what students can get from a platform like Khan Academy, they get from the platform like Khan Academy, but then they also have really great supports in the classroom, both their teacher and their peers. And so the ideal state, and I actually saw this in Las Vegas last week, and this was a teacher in a very high-need community, but she had her students working on Khan Academy, and then she would use that information to pair her students up, and as I was mentioning earlier. And when you see that part, you're like, this is the most human math class of any, because the kids are learning to communicate with each other, they're learning to empathize, they're learning to, by teaching the math, they're learning it that much deeper. And so, the math class of the future, I think, is a hybrid of, you're going to have some whole class instruction for certain parts. You're going to have some time, kids will be able to do personalized practice where they're working on their zone of proximal development, and that the whole time teacher is the conductor, and they can see what's going on, they can do focus intervention, and they can pair students up and have more time to do higher order tasks like projects.
So I think the last time I saw you give a presentation, you had a chart that it was based on your initial work in East Palo Alto Elementary, or one of the schools near the fancy part of Silicon Valley in the lower income area. And it showed something I think is really important, because I think there's a myth that's built up that some kids can learn and some kids can, and the system's kind of organized around that. And what you showed was how students, because a lot of math is progressive, you build on what you learn, that you can quickly catch up. So, we have this kind of myth that's built up that low-performing kids are just low-performing kids, kids in the middle are the kids in the middle, and high-achieving kids are always high-achieving. Talk about that, because now your data, how much data do you have that you've accumulated that you can use to show that it could just be one concept that's missing to get, for a kid's aptitude to soar?
Yeah, that's right. And this was, that was data when it was a program called the Peninsula Bridge, which was for high-need kids from East Palo Alto, which is a very underserved part next to a very affluent part. And yeah, back then, this was back in 2010, we saw, I used to show this one young girl who was, for most of the time in the summer program, way behind her peers, and it was actually negative exponents. And as soon as she got through that, 7 weeks later, she was at the, way ahead of everyone else. And so and we see this over and over and over again, not just in the data. People come up to me all the time, like, I thought I was bad at X, but I just realized I had a gap in that. We actually had one of our top engineers, the reason why he wanted to work at Khan Academy was he flunked calculus 3 times. And only later, he actually became a reasonably successful salesperson, but then he always wanted to be an engineer. And when Khan Academy existed, and he's close to my age, and he started using it, he realized the reason why he flunked calculus was because he never understood negative exponents. And as soon as he understood negative exponents, the rest of calculus was intuitive.
I've always thought negative exponents were really easy.
Exactly. That's what I tell people, but we should do a lesson together.
Oh, yeah, right.
That'll be good. But we see it over and over again, and even when I visit schools over and over, I see this narrative pretty consistently. I thought I was bad at math.
Yeah.
And the reason why people think that is because when they're pushed ahead, those gaps accumulate, and at some point, something gets written on the board that makes no sense, and so you're just led to assume that.
So, you have massive amounts of data, and the insights that can come from that. Do you have people wanting to come to you and say, we want to find the optimum path of learning? Do you have like big brain institutions, universities, Caltech,
Yeah, we do, and I think there's a couple of things that we're always trying to balance is,
Savannah from Afghanistan, is she going to come and mine
yeah,
this
she might be the right person. I think there's a couple of things. One, we want to be very careful with that data, and I think that's one of our values as a not-for-profit is that people have to trust that we're going to do right by it. And I tell the team, the only reason we'll ever use data is to either improve ourselves so that we can serve more people, or to personalize so that an individual student can get more more value from the time that they put in. But there are researchers that have wanted to help us, and for us, it's just about resources and capacity that some folks from Stanford have wanted to work with us, and they've done some pretty cool stuff. But yeah, I mean, the opportunity space is huge, and it's just a question of resourcing and capacity.
I mean, you think about the struggle of being a teacher in a classroom of diverse students, and they have 20 kids. Some are, high achieving, and they have to be held back a bit. Struggling ones need more attention, and having that kind of the ability to mine that data, not the teacher itself, but someone who's can provide a useful service could make teaching incredibly easier to do in a really challenging environment.
No, exactly. Teachers actually, there have been studies on this. On average, a teacher will teach to the 22nd percentile. And because it's hard to leave behind the kids that are slowing down, but even if you teach at the 22nd percentile, it actually still means it's too fast for 21% of the kids. Yeah. And it's actually too slow for 78% or 79% of the kids. And so, and a big issue a lot of people talk about in education today is especially kids who go to in underserved areas, high needs, even A or B students, because they're not having the right level of rigor for them, even though they're getting A's, when they go to college, they have trouble with school. And there's a lot of very healthy push of like, hey, how do you turn up the rigor in these classrooms? But that wasn't happening in a vacuum, because the higher need the area, the more variance there is in the student population. There are sultanas in that classroom, and there are actually potential sultanas, but right now they have way too many gaps to be able to participate. And so those teachers are, they're not serving these kids well with the right rigor they should get, because they're trying to keep these kids going along. And so the only way you're able to reach both is by having some level of personalization in the process.
So does the same experience in math apply for, my favorite subject, reading, or science, or other areas? I mean, are you as advanced in those areas, and what's your aspirations to broaden out this mission?
I think if you go into the sciences, for sure, and it's not that you can do all of it with modalities like this, things like labs and stuff, you still have to do it in person and design experiments, but the core of physics is applied math. A lot of the core of chemistry is applied math. A lot of the core of even biology, and we have those now on our platform where kids can learn the mastery learning framework. I think reading, English language arts, it's more nuanced. I think there's elements of it that can be addressed in this way, kind of the core grammar, certain aspects of reading comprehension, but then there's other elements. I think the difference in English language arts, if I don't know exponents well or decimals well, and if I'm just presented with a quadratic equation, it's not going to be good for me. It's just going to blow my self-esteem. But in English and language arts, there is good evidence that being presented with texts that are maybe ahead of where you are is still constructive. So I think it's, in math it's an and I think in reading and English and language arts it's even more of an and.
So you put up a chart here that should be deeply disturbing for everybody in this room, and it's a fact that we have so many kids graduating from high school, actually graduating with a piece of a diploma, but they're certainly not college ready or career ready. And the remediation rate amongst community colleges, which is the access to higher education for a huge number of students, the 60% number, is deeply troubling. Is there a way to surgically strike that challenge for you all? Is there a place that is there a role for you all to play to deal with those gaps can you customize create a path forward for a 24-year-old kid that can't go forward, has these gaps, wants to go to community college to get an AS degree? Is there?
Yeah, so I mean, simple answer is we already have a lot of informal adoption of, a lot of colleges, community colleges and four-year colleges now tell their students, hey, you're gonna show up next August, why don't you spend the summer, go on Khan Academy, go to X, Y, and Z subjects on Khan Academy, take what we have a course challenge where you can learn what you know and you don't know, and then you can take unit tests, fill in your gaps, et cetera. A lot of folks are doing that. The ideal world is if we can short circuit it, because once again, college algebra, what's called college algebra is 10th grade math. And
well, that's encouraging.
It is, it's algebra 2. And so the real benefit is, there even shouldn't be such thing as college algebra. If we serve our 10th graders right, they should be able to get to that level by the end of 10th grade. And so I would love to explore, we're not there yet, I think this is further in the future, of ways that if students are able to truly master 10th grade math, that they're able to get that checkbox. And then that unlocks a lot in terms of that college algebra is the single biggest gating factor for most kids to getting a college degree.
So you've been doing this just kind of with exponential success in so many, in terms of the metrics of people using it and the success it's brought. Lessons along the way, what would be, like your biggest mistake?
Oh, I mean, tons of mistakes.
What's your favorite mistake?
Favorite mistake. I think it was probably early in Khan Academy's journey, and this is a mea culpa, maybe being too purist in, hey, tomorrow we should go wholesale into mastery-based learning, and maybe naive as well. That, because even if it makes intellectual sense, there's just so much that has to work right. People want to do it, but it's just hard. And teachers are overworked, they have enough on their plate. And so, if I had do-overs, I would have gotten to the point that we are now, where we're like, hey, there's actually a really powerful hybrid approach that can get us in that direction much faster.
Very good. I got two more questions. Well, actually a question, and then I'm going to ask you to share a video that may be the best way to tell this story, because it's all, it's about the human context of what you do that probably gets you waking up each day fired up to run this incredible not-for-profit. For the next, where do you want to be 10 years from now with Khan Academy?
10 years from now, I hope that we are viewed as an institution for the planet that, let's say 10 years, there's 1 billion learners on it, and they are able to learn from any level. Pre-K, we launched Khan Academy Kids. I know that's another area that's close to your heart. Even as early as preschool, all the way to through the core of college. Ideally, they're able to do that, especially when they're younger, in a physical environment, and get all the benefits of a community with their teachers and their peers, and build their social emotional skills, and et cetera. But through Khan Academy, not only are you able to learn well, but you're also able to signal to the world what you know. And that you can then, there's a direct path between that type of learning and opportunity in the broader world. If we're able to do that for, literally billions of folks, yeah, that would be a good reality.
That sounds pretty good to me, too. So if I had to summarize our day and a half here together, it would be that the objective, and what our speakers have talked about, is how can the next generation reach their God-given potential? That we're in this incredible world of opportunity, but it's also, has perils in front of it because of the changing nature of our society, our culture, our economics, technology. All this stuff is creating a lot of anxiety. And so all the speakers seem to me were talking about that. I know that's the mission of many of the people here. And so you have a video that kind of, I think, describes the fact that we all are, we're all imperfect under God's watchful eye for sure, but we all have, human potential is almost unlimited. And it's kind of up to us as a society that's caring to organize ourselves to make sure that people can fulfill their dreams by reaching their God-given potential. That's how I interpreted what you tell me. You describe it your way, and then show us this video.
Yeah, I'll just give a little bit of a primer. I don't want to ruin it, but I was giving a talk at Stanford 2 weeks ago, and I said, any questions? The first kid raised his hand, and before he could even talk, he starts crying. I was like, what's happening here? And he's like, I don't know if I can even say this, and he's, literally tears. And then he tells his story, and his story was powerful. And by the end of it, half the room, including myself, were tearing up. And I said, hey, I have to get your story. So after everyone had left, I was like, can I just get you on my iPhone, your video? And this is the video I took.
My name is Jason Spires. It's nice to be able to use that name, because for many years, the only name that mattered in my life was Mr. K99397, because that was my prison number. Unfortunately, at a very young age, I made a stupid decision to sell cannabis, and I ended up in prison. And fortunately, when I got arrested, it helped my mother get clean and sober, and it helped my father get clean and sober. So I now had parents that were actively involved in trying to do good things for me. And I decided that I wanted to improve my education. And one of the things that I remember is my mother went online to Khan Academy, and she would get printed out transcripts of what the videos were talking about in math. While I was in prison, I was able to, with Khan Academy's transcripts, learn how to do many of the math procedures that helped me perform better on the SAT. And when I got towards the end of my sentence, I was able to get to a work release program, which allowed me to go to community college. And I had to take the SAT in anticipation of transferring to a university. And I used the Khan Academy SAT prep. And fortunately, I was accepted as a transfer student at Stanford University. It was having videos that were easy to understand. It was being able to learn knowledge without having to admit that I'm stupid because I didn't already know it. It took away the embarrassment factor of having to ask someone else. I can honestly say that Khan Academy and everyone involved with the organization and everyone who has supported its expansion and growth to other students has made an impact upon me. And I can only tell you that there's so many other people that have the potential to make my story nothing if they can just get their hands on the ability to learn the way that I was able to, which Khan Academy was a part of. Thank you, because you played a role in me now being a Stanford University student and studying computer science after being locked up 15 years without access to technology.
Wow. Thank you, Sal.
Thanks, Governor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing. Take your gift.
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sal. That kind of ends our day and a half together. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for all the input that you give us during the year so that we try to make these summits better each and every year. I want to thank the sponsors, of course, and the speakers that have inspired us and gotten us all fired up. You know me, I'm unlike Sal, who said he was impatient and probably should have been more cautious about how to go forward. I don't want you all to think that way. Legislate, you have a finite amount of time in your jobs to serve, and I hope that you are constantly figuring out a creative way to be big and bold, bring people together, try to create consensus for sure. But when you have a chance to move the needle in terms of policy, don't plan a 5-year plan to do it. 5-year plans in politics don't work. They just don't work. So I hope you're inspired by the time that we've been together, and I hope that you're big and bold and that you advocate with passion and conviction the need to make sure that every child learns. Thank you all very much. Safe journeys home.